Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's start our discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 8 important articles. So let's cover these topics comprehensively along with added PIB coverage. Wherever necessary, I've brought in some facts and relevant information from PIB press releases as well to make it a comprehensive discussion so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have a couple of important announcements. If you're preparing for mains 2026, or even those who are preparing for 2027 and beyond, if you want to cover international relations for the mains exam, focus on the key topics and master the skill of mains answer writing, particularly for international relations, then I'll be taking a one shot marathon session this week on the coming Wednesday, that is the 24th of June, starting from 6 p.m. onwards. So I urge all of you to attend this session live. The link is already available on our YouTube channel and it will be added in the description box of this video as well. So click on notify me and ensure that you join me live on 24th June, Wednesday at 6 p.m. to cover international relations for mains in one short marathon. Then if you're looking for a well-structured guided preparation program for UPSC Civil Services examination, then this is the right opportunity for you as Unacademy is marking and celebrating Shiksha Mahotsav. So our subscription is available at just 16,999, which will give you access to the live and recorded lectures, along with the study material, the test series, and one-on-one mentorship. So this is a limited period offer, and if you're interested to enroll, please click on the link provided in the description, and you have to enter the code IAS English in order to avail the discount. Now, this is the right time, not just because of the lowest price, but because of the triple treat that you're going to receive. You'll also get double validity. If you take a 6-month subscription, 6-month subscription is free, which is perfect for 2027 aspirants. If you're preparing for 2028 and beyond, then you can look at 12-month, 18-month subscription, where you will get additional 12 or 18-month subscription free. You'll also get CSE Assure Guarantee if you're buying a subscription of more than 9 months. Under CSE Assure, let's say for some reason you don't clear the exam despite your best efforts, then your next attempt is on us. Of course, you'll have to fulfill some criterias. You would have to attend some classes, taken up some tests. If that effort was there from your end and still you couldn't clear the exam for some reason, then your next attempt is entirely on us under CSE Assure. So those interested, please check out the details by clicking on the link provided in the description below. Now let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 8, there's a very interesting article on the topic of ultra processed foods. Food, or essentially junk food, which we all consume, particularly children, are largely addicted to it. They happen to be very high in fat, sugar, and salt or sodium. So these ultra processed foods are categorized as HFSS, which stands for high fat, high sugar, and high salt. So the entire article here is focused on ultra processed foods and HFSS foods, which are having a detrimental health impact on our population, particularly on children. And how can this problem be tackled? Because studies have clearly established that regular consumption of ultra processed foods will directly contribute to higher body mass index, leading to obesity, which can trigger metabolic diseases, starting with diabetes, as it can push up insulin resistance, triggering high blood pressure and high cholesterol levels. which could in turn lead to cardiovascular diseases. Studies have also shown that ultra processed foods are linked with inflammation and cancer causing carcinogens. So, these non communicable diseases, or NCDs, today represent the biggest health risk in most countries across the world, not just in developed nations, even in developing countries. This has become the primary healthcare challenge today. It not only deprives our population of good nutrition and healthy, nutritious food, it also pushes them towards deadly lifestyle linked diseases that can have a devastating impact on the society and on the economy. So, the entire article here is focused on how to tackle the threat posed by ultra processed foods. So, here I will take some references from PIB articles. There was a well researched PIB backgrounder article on this very topic from last year. So, based on that, let's discuss this topic in detail and go beyond the Hindu newspaper article. Now, when we say ultra processed foods, or more commonly referred to as junk food, what does it really include? It includes all highly processed food items, including biscuits, chips, sodas, and other beverages, which are essentially loaded with sugar. So, any factory made, factory produced food product, which goes through a lot of processing, which has a lot of additives, many of it which could be dangerous, falls into this category. When you look at the label behind the packet, you will see that apart from the regular edible ingredients, they will have high levels of maltodextrin, acidity regulators, nature identical flavoring, and as well as coloring agents. Then it would also use refined oil, especially palm oil, and will contain very high levels of salt, trans fat, and as well as sugar. So, any food item which falls into this bracket can be labeled as junk food, ultra processed food. Take, for example, even sausages, right? Otherwise, what you think could be healthy food could also be ultra processed. Various derivatives of, let's say, paneer or tofu. So, a lot of food that we consume today, something we buy from supermarkets, or something that we sit at home and order online, most of it tends to be extremely high in trans fat, salt, and sugar. And this has a devastating impact on human health. And what is worse is that these brands and companies which produce them, they not only design the products in this manner deliberately, but they also carry out misleading advertisements. They engage in emotional, psychological marketing tactics to attract their consumers, to get them hooked and create an addiction pattern. In fact, studies have shown that ultra processed food triggers the very same centers in your brain, which is linked with other addictions like cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, etc. So, if these items are dangerous for human health, if they are restricted, if they are clearly labeled that they are hazardous and harmful for your health, then why isn't the government enforcing the same norms and standards on ultra processed foods? Now, when you look at the food and beverage industry, what is really alarming is that there are two main concerns. One is the product design, how the product is developed. Let's say you take some chocolates, for example, or a biscuit or a sauce. They are all designed in such a way that they will trigger your dopamine response, they'll trigger your appetite, and essentially they taste good. And it is engineered to be in this way. So when the product is developed, right? There's a lot of thought which goes into it to make it highly addictive so that you keep buying their products again and again. This applies for fast food products as well, what we eat at fast food chain restaurants, right? So, this is one major challenge where deliberately the industry is producing such food items which triggers addiction, which appeals to your taste buds, which delivers the required dopamine hit again and again, creating a vicious addiction pattern. And children, adolescents will be the most vulnerable because when you look at these products that children crave, look at the colors they use, look at the design they employ, look at the ingredients they put into it. It is all designed to appeal to the target audience, to make it attractive to them, to get them addicted and hooked by triggering an emotional psychological response. They do the same with marketing as well, which is the second big concern. The misleading marketing by food and beverage brands is the next biggest concern. For example, today there are a lot of brands which try to promote their products as healthy alternatives, claiming that it is protein rich or chips are baked or they don't use sugar. But eventually, if you actually see the label, you will realize that these food items, most of them at least in the market, they're actually not healthy. They are using misleading packaging, misleading marketing to trick you that their food options are healthier than other brands that are there in the market. Now, take for example a very popular ice cream brand, a global MNC. They were actually not making ice cream at all. Instead of using milk and sugar, they were loading it with palm oil, emulsifiers, and other additives and extreme levels of sugar. It was basically a frozen dessert, but they were branding it as ice cream. It was only after public awareness and a huge outrage by the consumers that this particular brand, I would not like to name it, now they have changed the packaging and they clearly mention that it's not ice cream, it's frozen dessert. You find such misleading tactics being employed by a number of food and beverage companies. Even on the packet behind, right, the label that they carry and the nutritional information and the ingredients that they list, many times they try to mislead the public here as well. So this is where government regulators come into picture. The Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, the FSSAI, a statutory body, has a very, very important responsibility to impose the right regulations and restrictions on food and beverage companies. Though we have packaging standards, nutritional standards in place, in many cases they get violated as well. They're not properly enforced. And front of package labeling is not at all seen in case of India. Now, when you look at alcohol, cigarettes, or any such harmful products, there is clear front of package labeling saying it's extremely dangerous, it can cause cancer, you might die because of these products. But the same is not done with harmful food products. With regard to, let's say, a biscuit packet or chocolate or chips, on the front, there should be a clear label saying this item is high in fat, salt, and sugar. It could result in deadly diseases. Consume at your own risk, consume with caution. This labeling can actually lead to behavioral changes amongst the consumers. But unfortunately, this is not being implemented. As I said, children and adolescents are at the receiving end. Look at the marketing ads of all the food and beverage brands. They are designed to appeal to children by capturing their attention, by appealing to their interests. They create a emotional pitch, right? And even many adults get hooked onto these food products. I'm sure all of us at some point would be addicted to these items. And the entire fault doesn't lie with you alone. The fault lies with the lack of government regulations, the lack of enforcement, and the lack of responsibility on the food and beverage industry. So, that is the key topic being discussed here by the writer as well. Now, let's see what is the policy approach here, what are the policy gaps that are present, and how it can be addressed. The Government of India brought out the National Multi Sectoral Action Plan for Prevention and Control of Common Non Communicable Diseases. implemented between 2017 to 2022. It was very much a part of the national health policy. Under this national action plan, the government was recommending prohibition and even restrictions on advertising of HFSS food items. See, until a few years ago, these hazardous food items were widely available even in school canteens. Even parents who wouldn't be aware, they would pack this as part of their child's lunch. That is the extent of addiction that the society had developed, and it largely remains even today. But one good thing is, with social media, with a lot of positive influencers, food influencers, there has been an awakening, a revolution of sorts, where people are reading the label today, where people are more aware of what they're eating, what they're consuming. And it is largely the intervention of the public which has led to some changes. But from the government side, from the policy side, there is hardly any effective enforcement which is happening. In fact, in February 2026, the Supreme Court of India took note of this matter in response to a public interest litigation, and it has recommended that front of package labeling should be made mandatory. See, right now, when you take any food product, right, let's say a chips packet, behind the packet, there is nutritional information and the ingredients. And I hope you know that even the ingredients are supposed to be listed in the decreasing order of the quantity used in the product. So the item ranking first will be the highest concentration in the product. If sugar is at first or second position, it means the whole product is packed with sugar, nothing else, right? So, though this has been implemented with regard to the back packaging, the front packaging is what matters, because not many people would really put in the effort and time to look at the labels on the back of the packet, right? Also, the font size is very small and it's not reader friendly. It's not even properly readable in many cases. That's why front of package labeling is very crucial. On the front of the packet, if there is a clear health warning, marking it as a hazardous product, high in fat, sugar, and salt. This could lead to behavioral changes. It also requires regulations on school canteens, where such products are ensured that they are not available. And it requires awareness amongst children, where schools can place restrictions. They can clearly instruct parents not to send these items as part of the lunch of their child. Many schools have started doing it, but it requires government intervention. Schools are doing it on their own, not because there is some government regulation in this regard. Even the member of parliament, the MPs in the parliament, have raised concern about the issue, asking the government to bring in stronger measures. The economic survey also recognizes the rising prevalence of junk food and its direct link with non communicable diseases. So, what is required is a well thought out policy. We do have regulations in place by FSSAI, but proper enforcement and tackling misleading marketing and pushing these companies through incentives and disincentives to come out with healthier nutritional products instead of pushing junk food on the population. So, based on what we discussed, please take up this mains practice question and practice your answer writing. And also let me know what is your experience with ultra processed foods. I'm sure all of us at some point, as I said, would have developed that addiction, but you might be better aware today and you're trying to overcome that. So let us know your story, your experience. It might help others as well. So please let us know in the comments. Now let's look at the next article. On page number 8 and 12, we have two articles, one editorial and a detailed article that focuses on DNA forensics and DNA profiling and its role in law enforcement and investigations. It's a very important topic under internal security and as well as under Indian polity. The editorial here is mainly focused on DNA testing for paternity test. So this is a completely different topic altogether, but eventually it is all related to DNA testing. The article which I'm referring to on page 12, that is related to DNA profiling and DNA forensics. So both the topics are connected through the same technology. Though the application differs, the technology remains the same. Now, let's talk about the editorial first. Let's understand the role of DNA test in establishing paternity and parental lineage, its role in criminal justice system. And we'll talk about DNA forensics and DNA profiling as well, how it aids investigation and law enforcement, how it can bring better security, and what concerns do they raise. There are some serious ethical and legal concerns that come up with such technologies. Now, first, let's talk about the editorial that focuses on paternity test. So, when you take a case of a child abandoned by his or her father, there is an emotional longing for the child to identify who the father is, right? And also, this serves a legal purpose as well in with regard to inheritance, with regard to a civil or a criminal dispute or a case. In many cases, establishing the paternal lineage becomes critical when the child doesn't know who the father is or when there are doubts about the paternity linkage. So, the common method used is a DNA test by collecting the samples from the father and the child, could be blood, saliva, or any other sample, to establish the DNA linkage. Because DNA technology is absolutely precise and effective. When it comes to establishing genetic lineage, it can very clearly establish whether a person is indeed the father or not of the child in question. Now, there is a lot of stigma attached to this as well, right? Such children are often considered or treated by the society as illegitimate children. So, there is a lot of taboo and stigma attached to this. So, in our criminal laws under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sakshya Adhiniyam that has replaced the Indian Evidence Act, in case of paternity test, the burden of proof is placed on the father in question, not on the child. It's not on the one seeking the confirmation. It is on the one who has to prove whether that person is the father or not. So this protects that child or the offsprings from that legal and traumatic experience, places the burden of proof on the alleged father. Now, there are many court rulings from the Supreme Court and high courts in this regard. In several cases, in property disputes, in divorce cases, sometimes in criminal cases as well, courts have often ordered a paternity test. Sometimes it is often sought by the child, sometimes by the mother or the family, sometimes by the father themselves. So, courts often order these paternity tests in order to secure complete justice to that victim in that particular case. But, however, one issue which often gets ignored is the privacy of the alleged father and the control over their genetic data. Because, see, under the Indian Constitution, you have complete bodily autonomy. That includes autonomy and rights over your genetic data. This has been very clearly established in the K.S. Puttaswamy judgment, a landmark case where the Supreme Court in 2017 declared right to privacy as a fundamental right that is enshrined under Article 21. And this right to privacy includes your privacy with regard to your genetic data. So, in several cases, there could be a malicious intent to harm the reputation of an individual, to bring up false allegations that some person is my father. Imagine a random person who has a deviant mind. They start claiming that some celebrity or a politician is their father, right? So, this could be a frivolous case. This could harm the dignity and reputation of that celebrity or that individual that they would have built over years and decades of effort. It could get ruined in one instant because of a false case alleging that this person is my father. So, in such cases, in frivolous matters, if courts are pushing for DNA tests, that is a breach of the individual's right to privacy. It's a breach of their fundamental right. So, DNA testing for paternity test should be used selectively. There should be some prima facie evidence, some prima facie angle to see that there is a connection between the alleged father and the child. Only in such cases, or only where complete justice can be done through a paternity test, only then a paternity test has to be applied. Because in the case Puttaswamy judgment, the Supreme Court established the three test principle. Privacy can be violated by the state only on three specific grounds. One, it should be legal. To violate someone's privacy, there should be a legal backing to it. Second, it should be necessary. Just because you can doesn't mean you violate the privacy of an individual. Just because it is legal doesn't mean the state gets the authority to violate the rights of the individual. It should be necessary for that particular case. And more importantly, it has to be proportional, or what we call as the proportionality test. These criteria will have to be satisfied. In such matters where a DNA test, a paternity test could help solve a case, if it could help settle a dispute and secure proper justice to the victims or to the litigants, in such matters, yes, paternity test can be ordered by the court. But this should be a last resort. This should not be the first option. Just because a random person is alleging that this person is my father doesn't mean the courts immediately order a paternity test. That could be a violation of their fundamental right to privacy. But where it is really required to secure justice to the litigants, if it is really necessary in the interest of the case, in the interest of justice, then paternity test can be used as a last resort. So that is what we take away from this editorial on DNA technology in paternity tests and how it conflicts with an individual's right to privacy. Now, let's talk about the other article related to the same topic, related to DNA forensics and DNA profiling in police investigation and law enforcement. If you guys remember, just a couple of days ago, we spoke about a new app developed by National Crime Records Bureau known as Abhigyan. It was launched by Union Home Minister Amit Shah. This app now provides for real-time fingerprint verification for the police. Using the Abhigyan app developed by NCRB, the police can now use their smartphones to record the fingerprint of a suspect whom they might have caught on the street or in a particular case and match the fingerprint with the national database, or the NAFIS, the National Automated Fingerprint Identification System. It's a national database developed by NCRB that contains the fingerprints of nearly 1.3 crore individuals who have been arrested or convicted. So, those who have been arrested on the basis of suspicion in case of serious offenses involving a jail term of 7 years or more, those who have been convicted of serious crimes and offenses, who might be habitual offenders, all their fingerprints are recorded. And it's part of a digital database called NAFIS that was established in 2022, the National Automatic Fingerprint Identification System. So, using this app, now the police can do a real time fingerprint test of any suspect, any individual to match with existing database. So, parallelly, the NCRB has been rolling out DNA profiling and forensics to be used in police investigation and law enforcement. Because the NCRB is working on a national level database as part of the criminal Procedure Identification Act, which is a parliamentary law passed in 2022. So, collection of such biometrics of an arrested individual or a convicted individual, it is legal, it is statutory. So, it fulfills the first test of the case Puttaswamy judgment. So, it is legal for the police, for the law enforcement agencies to record your biometrics, to keep it documented for any further help in cases. So, the Criminal Procedure Identification Act, CRPI 2022, provides the legal backing to capture your biometrics. So, today, what biometrics are captured? It includes physical and biometric details. It includes your photograph, a clear photograph. It includes a iris scan. It includes the fingerprint of the individual. It also includes the DNA profile, which is collected through either blood sample or through saliva samples. Clear? So, if a person gets arrested or convicted for serious offenses, these are the basic physical biometric details that are captured by the police, and it is all documented into a national database that is developed and maintained by National Crime Records Bureau. Clear? Now, this data is being stored for a period of 75 years, which will more than cover the lifespan of an individual. So, this technological platform that the government of India has established is now helping police and law enforcement across the country to match the records in real time, and especially to catch habitual offenders. Let's say a serial murderer or a serial rapist who might have served their term and gotten out of jail or escaped from custody, goes on to commit similar crimes in other parts of the country. So, to catch such habitual offenders, this technology would be extremely useful. It would help in interstate cases. It would be a big boon for the police because otherwise, matching such records would take several months of hard police work on the ground. Now it can be done in a matter of minutes by sitting in front of a computer. So across India, 2,500 plus stations have been set up where these details can be captured. They are either available at police stations or at prisons where the suspects and the convicts, their details are captured, logged into the database, and now it makes it seamless for the police to quickly verify these basic records. So this access is also given to central law enforcement agencies as well, such as the CBI, the National Investigation Agency, Narcotic Control Bureau. All these central law enforcement agencies will also have access to it. Because, see, without such a database, in many cases, the culprits might actually get away due to lack of coordination between police and central agencies, especially in interstate cases. For example, I'll tell you one real incident. I'm sure you must have heard of a terror group called Indian Mujahideen. It had a notorious commander called Yasin Bhatkal, who was leading its operations in India in the 2006-2010 period. The founders of Indian Mujahideen, the Bhatkal brothers, they had fled to Pakistan, taken shelter in Pakistan. That included Riaz Bhatkal and his brother. Whereas Yasin Bhatkal was running the terror network, carrying out several attacks across India. He was India's most wanted terrorist at that point. But what is shocking is that he had been arrested across multiple states for various other offenses. He was picked up by West Bengal police for pickpocketing. He had been arrested by another state police for other petty cases. But those state police forces, they did not know that it's the same individual that Karnataka, Maharashtra, Delhi police are looking for. And this person is the most wanted terrorist of India. Why? Because they didn't have a system through which such records can be matched easily. So, with this database, it will create a seamless interaction between state police and central law enforcement agencies, and it will help catch habitual offenders, solve interstate crimes, And even old cases which might have reached a dead end, old cases which might have been shut, can now be reopened and cracked with the help of these tools and platforms. Is that clear? So this will supplement and complement the interlinking of police stations that the government of India has established after the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. That is another major technology initiative led by the Home Ministry, where all police stations across police forces are interconnected through a seamless IT infrastructure to share information with each other. So, this system will now help match records and look out for wanted individuals and suspects and crack the cases in a very short amount of time. But, however, these technologies raise very serious concerns. If the police can check your fingerprints, your iris scan on the streets, if they can stop you anywhere, asking you to verify your biometrics, this can create the fear of profiling. What if certain individuals are specifically targeted? What if people of certain community are specifically targeted? What if the technology goes wrong? There is always a possibility that there could be technical errors that could creep into the system. What if the system is abused for political reasons, mainly to target criticism, dissent, and to stifle opposition? Given the extent of politicization of our police forces and law enforcement agencies, this is a very real risk. So, while these technologies are necessary to improve security, to maintain law and order, to better investigate crimes, this should be balanced with fundamental rights that are guaranteed under the Constitution. It should also address the ethical concerns, because this could potentially enable mass surveillance as well. This could become one of the tools for mass state led surveillance. So, that is the reason why you need a well balanced data protection law. So, though India has a Digital Personal Data Protection Act that was passed recently by the Parliament, there is a lot of criticism against the law that it favors the government and the law enforcement agencies. More than securing the rights of the citizens, it is giving exemptions to security forces on the grounds of national security. Compared to other similar data protection laws, let's say in European Union, the Indian Data Protection Act is heavily criticized for being imbalanced, for favoring the government, while only placing responsibilities on private intermediaries, on private tech companies and social media firms. But the government itself is largely exempting itself from the duties and responsibilities under the Data Protection Act. So, fixing the data protection law, securing the basic rights, and addressing the ethical issues through a wider debate with the civil society and the public is the right approach. Yes, these technologies are necessary, but at the same time, the genuine legal ethical concerns have to be addressed as well. So please take down this mains practice question based on what we have discussed. Now let's move to the next article. On page number 8, there's a column that is evaluating Brexit 10 years later. 2026 marks the 10th anniversary of Brexit. So, what is Brexit? That is something we have to understand first. Then, what is the takeaway after 10 years? Has it really worked for Britain? Brexit refers to Britain's exit from the European Union. So, back in 2016, in United Kingdom, a referendum was held where people of Britain, the citizens, were asked to choose whether the UK should remain as a member of European Union or not, whether to stay within the EU or leave the EU. This had become a hot political issue in Britain by 2016. In fact, Britain has always had a uneasy relationship with European Union. Because see, Britain lives in its colonial imperial dilemma. It it always believes that it was the greatest empire. It always believes that cooperating with other smaller, weaker, or similarly placed powers is not up to its mark or up to its expectations. Britain has been that colonial power which is still affected by that legacy, so-called legacy. So within Britain, there has always been a complaint that UK has been contributing more to the EU than what it gets in return. For example, one of the criticisms against EU was that UK is contributing more funds to the European Union. And when you're part of the EU, you accept the trade, regulatory, and immigration standards that are prescribed by the regional economic and political bloc. See, under the EU, the border controls are relaxed, especially if you become part of the Schengen zone. The hard border controls are completely removed. There'll be no border fencing. There'll be no aggressive border patrolling. Immigration requirements would be completely relaxed, providing for visa free travel for EU citizens between the EU member states, which are part of the Schengen Agreement. It facilitates free movement of people. Then, through the trade agreements, it will facilitate the free movement of goods, services, and investments. It gives enormous freedom for people to move from country to country, settle in any country of their choice, work in other countries, move their money, buy property in other countries. So it provides for true regional economic and financial integration and societal integration. But UK was always uncomfortable with this. UK felt that being part of the EU was like an inferior arrangement, which was doing the EU more benefit, and UK was apparently losing out. That at least that was the political narrative that was being built. That UK is contributing more funds, it's losing out on trade, it's attracting immigrants from other countries, it's following EU regulations affecting its national sovereignty. So this became a hot political issue, dividing UK politics and UK electorate. So a strong demand came up to leave the EU, and finally British government and the political establishment decided to hold a referendum to let the people decide whether the country should remain a part of EU or not. So this is called Brexit, where people were given two choices: either stay with EU or leave EU. So the end result was a narrow contest. 48% roughly voted to stay with EU, whereas 52% voted to leave the European Union. So the Leave campaign won by a very short margin, and thus it initiated the process of Britain exiting from EU as a member. So this itself was a very complicated process, because Britain exiting from EU is not a simple referendum and a voting process. It requires a lot of legal regulatory changes, because hard border controls will come back, trade restrictions will come back, the non-tariff barriers will come back. Then the question of investments, question of people who have migrated, settled in the UK, or British citizens settled in other European countries, what would happen to them? All these questions had to be addressed. So a post-Brexit workout or an agreement had to be carved out between EU and UK to ensure the formal exit of Britain. So under the Lisbon Treaty of European Union, which is the foundational treaty, you have Article 50 that provides for the exit process. A EU member can exit by invoking Article 50 provisions. And as per the Article 50 provisions, you need a exit treaty. You need a arrangement through which the new border control mechanisms, immigration standards, and trade restrictions can be decided. Because once UK is out of EU, goods cannot freely flow from Europe into UK. People cannot move freely between UK and EU. Investments cannot flow as well. The regulatory standards will change. So, to account for this, an exit agreement is necessary. After many, many rounds of talks and negotiations, finally one agreement had been worked out. But this agreement did not really work in Britain's favor. Because, see, Britain or United Kingdom, it's made up of four distinct countries, so four different sovereign jurisdictions. You have England, you have Wales, you have Scotland, and you have Northern Ireland. These four sovereign jurisdictions eventually make up United Kingdom or Britain, right? Now, this region that you see here next to Northern Ireland is your Republic of Ireland, which remains a EU member. Whereas Britain, as it exited EU, became a non-EU member. Now, the Irish people, be it in Northern Ireland of UK or in Republic of Ireland, are ethnically connected. And from decades, the Irish people have fought an insurgency against Britain to liberate the area and form a separate nation to unite with Republic of Ireland. Similarly, the Scots also have led their own insurgency for independence, right? So now this created a new problem. Previously, both were part of EU, so no border controls or trade restrictions existed. But now hard border controls has to come back. So in the initial agreement, when they worked out the exit treaty, they created a mechanism where all the goods headed from Great Britain, this is the island of Great Britain that comprises of Scotland, Wales, and England, towards the Irish territory, it would undergo a check, a customs check, and a security check, where taxes will be levied, checks will be done if the goods are heading towards Republic of Ireland. But if it is going to Northern Ireland, then there will be no checks, no duties placed on it. Why? Because Northern Ireland is part of UK, right? But to address the Irish insurgency back in 1998, UK, when it ended the insurgency in Ireland, it had signed a deal, the Good Friday Agreement, that provided for open borders between the two Irish regions. This is a British commitment that was made to end insurgency in Northern Ireland, that borders between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland would always be open, allowing free movement of people and goods. So this mechanism they created after Brexit, where all goods coming from Great Britain towards the Irish territory, they would be checked, they would all be scrutinized. And if it's going to Northern Ireland, it would pass without duties. If it's going to Republic of Ireland, which is EU territory, duties would be placed on it. But this created a nightmare scenario because this created a backlog. Every item was being checked, every item had to be scrutinized, duties had to be levied, and it basically slowed down the movement of goods and affected the trade. And more importantly, it actually affected Britain within its own territory. Goods to Northern Ireland also got disrupted, creating massive shortage of essential items. So finally, to resolve this mess that they had created, they again renegotiated and worked out a new agreement called the Windsor Framework or the Windsor Agreement. Under the Windsor Agreement, now two separate lanes have been created, a green lane and a red lane. So goods coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, since it's all part of the same country, it will pass through the green channel without inviting any duties and further scrutiny, without compromising Britain's sovereignty and the internal movement of goods within its territorial jurisdiction. But those goods headed to Republic of Ireland, which is EU territory, they pass through red channel where border controls are applied. Security checks can be done, duties can be placed, immigration protocols can be followed. So this distinction has now been created through Windsor Framework or the Windsor Agreement. But one thing is very clear, that Britain has not really benefited from Brexit. Rather, it has seen the negative side effect of it. See, in Britain, as I said, the main issue with being part of EU was always about trade dependency, contributing more and receiving less in return, compromise on sovereignty with regard to regulation, immigration, etc. The British citizens kept on complaining that Europeans are coming to our country, settling down for work, and creating problems for British citizens. This was one of their main arguments for the Leave campaign, which was pushed by conservative political elements and far right wing elements. They adopted a protectionist approach against the spirit of globalization, right? Against the spirit of regional integration. Their argument was Europeans from the other countries, from Eastern Europe, from Central Europe, from other European nations, They are coming to Britain, destroying their economy and culture, taking away their jobs, increasing the rent, acquiring property. Based on all these arguments, they wanted to kick out other Europeans. But today, what has happened? Especially after the 2008 recession, the British economy is in a free fall, right? Britain is no longer the great power it was once, right? It's a power on the decline. It's a power which is almost coming down and seeing a complete collapse of its economic system and political system. So, after the other Europeans left post Brexit, migration from other European nations has come down. But the thing is, the British citizens, they never had the skills or the work ability to fill the positions that Europeans were leaving behind. Now, you take their NHS, for example, their national health system, a public health system. A number of doctors, nurses, and caregivers, they came from other European nations, especially from East Europe. They came from Ukraine, from Baltic countries, from Poland. Now, post Brexit, they were all kicked out, right? They had to leave because of the strict visa immigration norms that came in. This created a big gap in their NHS. So now what they have done, they have to depend on foreign migrant workers. They have taken more workers from South Asia and Southeast Asia. And again, they are complaining that the country is getting flooded with migrants. And they have a bigger problem with this. If they had a problem with white Europeans working in their country, they'll have a bigger problem with brown people from Asia working in their country. So today, their entire healthcare system is filled with Indian nurses, Pakistani caregivers, Philippines caregivers, Bangladeshi doctors. They created the problem themselves. If you look at the number of Indian nurses, before Brexit, it was around 10,000. Post Brexit, since vacancies have been created as Europeans have left, they don't want to stay and work in Britain. Indians have filled the gap. There are 40,000 Indian nurses today. It has jumped by 4 times. So, this again adds to far right sentiments, the anti immigration sentiments that has strengthened in Britain. You might have seen on social media, there's a lot of hate against migrants and refugees in Britain, and it has become a very big political issue, resulting in actual violence on the ground and hate crimes being committed on the ground. There's a lot of Islamophobia, there's a lot of racism, there's a targeting of Indians in particular, as Indians take up a number of key positions and work which they otherwise can't do. They are critical for their economy, but yet they are targeting them because this is convenient for populist politics. Right? This is what far right wing extremists do. This is what far right wing parties do. They will capitalize on these sentimental issues and emotional topics, and they will provide easy solutions which will never work in real. If their idea had to work, Brexit should have given better benefits for Britain. In fact, Britain today is on the weaker side. Britain's economy has taken a bigger hit. Why? Because 41% of British exports go to the European Union. Nearly 50% of what Britain imports comes from EU, which also means there is a trade deficit that Britain has with EU. Previously, they were having free access. Now, they are paying duties, losing their forex in balancing the deficit. So, this has taken a big hit on their economy as well. And this reflects in the political chaos and instability that you see in the British government and in British politics. In the last decade, believe it or not, Britain has had 6 different prime ministers. 6. In a 10-year period, ideally, you should have only 2 prime ministers or one. Britain has had 6, and now the current PM is also set to resign. Keir Starmer is losing support within his own party, and we might see the 7th PM within 10 years taking office. Number of home secretaries have changed, number of foreign secretaries have changed, right? The government keeps changing every now and then, highlighting the political chaos and the economic crisis and the social crisis that Britain is dealing with. In fact, anti-immigration hate is so much, racism is so much, that even mainstream politicians are trying to appeal to their voters on racist lines and anti-immigration lines. They're basically copying the far right wing extremists. Recently, there was a British MP who did something very controversial. This British MP filmed herself to put up the video on social media, showing her neighborhood and counting how many brown faces were there, basically to identify people on the basis of color. And it's also ironic and funny in a way. The country which colonized the world, right, which took over the entire world at one point, today they are complaining that the world is taking over their country, that other workers, migrants are taking over their country, which is not entirely true. The migrants are mainly contributing to their economy. Yes, there could be illegal migrants, there could be security incidents linked with some refugees and migrants, but that doesn't mean you target all migrants. So, if you have seen RRR, there's one epic scene, the end scene of the movie, which has won a lot of applause. It was always said the sun never sets on the British Empire, right? But the movie ends with a fantastic scene where this image is captured, right? Where the blood of the British officer is splattered on this image behind the wall that says the sun never sets on the British Empire. The sun is indeed setting on the British Empire today, right? And if Britain doesn't change its ways, if it doesn't move away from far right wing extremist politics, it can't really focus on its internal problems. It has a serious economic problem, it has serious political and social problems going on. And this is not because of outsiders. It's always easy to blame outsiders, right? That's convenient. Britain has to look within. It has to focus on its own reforms in order to address the issues. So, Brexit has largely been detrimental to Britain's influence, to Britain's economy, and to Britain's stability. Now, let's look at another important article. It's a small topic, let's cover it quickly. Project Nimbus is in the news. So, what is Project Nimbus? You might have seen these viral clips on social media where Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, was delivering an address to graduates at Stanford University. And several students, they walked out carrying the Free Palestine flags, shouting slogans against Google and against Project Nimbus. So, what is this Project Nimbus, which has divided the US tech industry? There is a divide within the Silicon Valley and in American universities. Students are opposing this. Project Nimbus is a very, very controversial deal signed in 2021 between American tech giants such as Amazon, which offers cloud services through AWS, and Google, then even Microsoft through its Azure cloud services. They had signed the deal with the Israeli government to provide data storage facilities with AI capabilities. So, Israeli ministries, Israeli government departments, Israeli government owned companies, even Israeli private startups, and more importantly, Israeli defense forces and its intelligence agencies, Mossad and Shin Bet. They are all using American cloud services, American tech products, not only in the functioning of their government, but reportedly it's being used for picking out target information in Gaza, in West Bank, to target Palestinian civilians. As reported, Israel is running an AI tool to pick out targets for airstrikes and for targeted assassinations. And all the data is run on cloud services, which are maintained and developed by companies like Amazon, Google, and others. Following a huge backlash against this, Microsoft said it is withdrawing from this contract. Though in other ways, Microsoft has continued its deal with Israeli government. Israel is accused of using disproportionate force against civilians. It is accused of committing a genocide, committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. 73,000 plus Palestinians have been killed. Many of them might have been extremists, but many of them were innocent women, children, old age people, innocent civilians who had nothing to do with Hamas or other extremist groups. So the large scale violence that Israel has used, which has been enabled with technology from American companies, is at the center of the controversy here, and that is what Project Nimbus is about. It's a contract, a technology contract, where American tech companies are offering their services, primarily cloud and AI and data storage services, for Israeli government, which is widely used by Israeli security establishment for target acquisition, for planning military raids and targets. So that's the reason why Project Nimbus has become very controversial. There's a lot of opposition against it. Now, coming to another important article on the supplement page, where you find science and tech and environment ecology articles, there's a very good article on biochar. How biochar can be a solution for India's stubble burning problem. See, as you know, stubble burning is a huge menace where agricultural waste and agricultural residue is burnt by farmers, especially in Punjab and Haryana, after the harvest season, right before the winter months. And around 20 million tons of paddy straw is burnt just in the Punjab Haryana belt in the northwest belt of India. This contributes significantly to greenhouse gas emissions and releases significant amounts of particulate matter, PM 2.5 and PM 10, which contributes to severe air pollution and deadly smog conditions in the Delhi NCR region and in northwestern part of India. This is a major health hazard. It's contributing to climate change. It affects visibility, it affects the economy as well. And the health impact is unimaginable in Delhi and the areas around it. So, what if there is an easy solution to fix this problem? And what if the agricultural waste can find a useful purpose? According to this article, biochar is the solution. Biochar, if it is used in agriculture, if it is used and mixed with soil, it can significantly increase the water holding capability of the soil, allowing the soil to retain more moisture, which is good for the crops. It can help in stimulating a microbiome, creating the right ecosystem for microbes to thrive, which are beneficial for the plants. And it can directly increase crop productivity by 10 to 30%, and even water holding capacity of soil by 10 to 25%. And this has been established through various studies. So we need to understand what is biochar, how is it produced, how is it even connected to stubble burning and agricultural waste. That is what we'll learn, which can be important even for prelims. So first, please note that biochar is produced from organic matter. You can use agricultural waste or even urban organic waste, which is generated. Through a certain process, biochar is produced. It looks something like this, right? Essentially, biocharcoal. Okay, so it does involve some form of burning, some form of combustion, through which waste material, organic waste, is turned into these small pellets. Now, when you infuse this into the soil system, it can hold more water because biocharcoal is highly porous. It has these minute pores where it can retain the water, increasing water storage, making water utilization more efficient in irrigation. And it will improve the nutrient profile of the soil, making the soil more fertile because it creates a perfect environment for a microbiome to thrive, for different microbes to flourish, which is good for plant health and increases agricultural productivity by 10 to 30% and water holding capacity of soil by 10 to 25%. So, how is this biochar actually produced? Biochar is produced by heating agricultural waste in a near anaerobic condition, a low oxygen environment. It's almost like anaerobic combustion, where there is almost no oxygen made available to it, but some amount of oxygen is necessary. In a low oxygen combustion process, agricultural waste is burnt, reduced through heat, and turned into charcoal, which is nothing but biochar. Now, this will not only act as carbon capture technique because you're locking this carbon away for years and centuries together, right? Agricultural waste will contain a lot of carbon. If you burn that in the open fields, you are releasing that back into the atmosphere, contributing to greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. But if you do this in a factory, in a controlled setting, in low oxygen conditions, turn it into biochar, put it back in the soil, then you're capturing that carbon for a very, very long period of time, helping in climate action. At the same time, it increases water holding capacity, makes water utilization more efficient, and improves the soil health by creating the right environment for microorganisms to flourish, which is good for agricultural productivity. So it can actually create a circular economy if you apply this in the context of urban waste management. Urban waste contains nearly 50% biodegradable organic matter, which is often dumped in landfills or incinerated in burners. Instead, if biochar is produced from it, right, it can be a great opportunity for India because India is one of the largest producer of urban municipal solid waste, generating 62 million tons of municipal solid waste every year. So if nearly 50% of it is organic waste, and if it can be turned into biochar, you can actually create a circular economy which will benefit Indian agriculture, benefit the Indian economy as well. Now let's move towards the prelim section, a few small articles, and we'll wrap up the discussion after that. On page 16, there's an article referring to the changing tide in the Ukraine war. Though Russia has been a much superior power in terms of military strength compared to Ukraine, of late, Ukraine has managed to turn the tide of the battle and it is registering major battlefield successes. Look at how innovatively Ukraine has used drones. Look at the massive attack it carried out in Moscow. Look at its covert operations or the recent attacks in Crimea. So Russia is on the back foot. Russia is taking a severe beating. So that's what the article is referring to. But despite this turning tide, Ukraine's humanitarian loss and damage has not reversed. According to a report by a human rights organization, 10 million Ukrainians have been displaced and they are not able to return or come back. So that is the report which highlights the humanitarian plight in Ukraine. Now, what is relevant for us for the exam is this human rights organization called International Rescue Committee or IRC, which can be asked as a prelims question. In the past, UPSC has asked questions about Amnesty International, Medicine Sans Frontiers, or Doctors Without Borders. So, such global civil society, non-profit human rights organizations are important. So, International Rescue Committee (IRC) was founded in 1933, right before Second World War, at the request of Albert Einstein. That's what makes it even more important. So, it works in several countries providing humanitarian work. It works in countries where disasters have occurred, wars, conflicts are taking place. It's a humanitarian organization delivering humanitarian aid, and it's a global non-profit organization. It's not a UN body, it's not an intergovernmental organization, it's a non-governmental organization, a NGO, a international NGO working in the field of humanitarian rights. Next, with regard to geography, there is this spectacular picture of the Stonehenge from the UK taken on the 21st of June. Now, why is this significant? Because this historical architectural marvel was designed to perfectly capture a critical geographical event that occurs generally on 21st June every year, which is nothing but the summer solstice. So, what is summer solstice? It's an astronomical geological event where the Earth attains its maximum tilt position. One of the hemispheres, that is the northern hemisphere, in case of summer solstice, acquires the maximum tilt with the North Pole reaching an axial tilt of about 23.4 degrees, which roughly places the Tropic of Cancer in direct sight with the sun, bringing the sun directly overhead over the northern hemisphere. And between the 20th and 22nd of June, generally on 21st June, northern hemisphere experiences its longest day and the shortest night, which is called the summer solstice. Similarly, in southern hemisphere, it's the opposite. It will occur in the December period between December 21st, 22nd, generally on December 21st, where southern hemisphere aligns in such a manner that the sun is directly overhead over the Tropic of Capricorn, creating the longest day and the shortest night. Like this, you also have winter solstice. Now, can you mention the details of winter solstice? When does it occur in northern hemisphere? When does it occur in Southern Hemisphere? Please mention that in the comments below. The last article, yesterday, India has inducted 3 major warships into the Indian Navy. Prime Minister Modi commissioned these vessels in Kolkata at GRSE, which is a public sector undertaking, a shipbuilding defense manufacturer, and 3 indigenously built warships have been commissioned. One is INS Dunagiri. This has to be the most important induction. It's a massive stealth frigate. Frigates are attack vessels loaded with advanced missiles and rockets and torpedoes. The Dunagiri can carry the BrahMos missile. It also carries air defense systems of its own, advanced rockets and torpedoes. And it's one of the frontline warships that will be deployed in case of a maritime battle. Then INS Sanchodak, as the name itself tells you, it's a research vessel, a survey vessel meant for oceanic survey, oceanic research. It consists of advanced radars and sonar systems, which is used to map the sea floor, to carry out hydrographic surveys, to extract oceanic data, which can serve a security and strategic purpose. Hydrographic maps are useful for naval deployments, especially for submarine deployments. Right? Mapping out the sea terrain and sea floor helps in submarine deployments. Then these vessels can also be used as a floating hospital during a humanitarian crisis or during wartime. Then INS Agre, which is a anti-submarine warfare shallow watercraft. It can operate in shallow waters closer to the coastline, especially in your territorial waters, and detect enemy submarines and launch counterattacks to neutralize enemy submarines, which might sneak up closer to India's territorial waters. So these vessels, they have not only been assembled completely in India, majority of the components and technology on board is also indigenous. A large majority of the technology and components are also indigenous. So this is a big boost for India's shipbuilding capabilities, for Make in India initiative, Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. And it also highlights the priorities of the government to project India as a major shipbuilding power, which enhances our maritime influence. So, on this note, I bring the analysis to an end. I hope it's been a useful, interesting session. If you benefited, do let me know with your likes and comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.